Have you ever found yourself in this situation? You're chatting with a girl. She's laughing brightly at your jokes, enthusiastically answering every question, and everything seems to be progressing incredibly well. However, as soon as you text her later that day, all you receive is a haunting silence. Or worse, she ghosts you without a trace. What on earth happened? Let me tell you this harsh truth: you had a nice conversation, and in the world of attraction, nice is the kiss of death. But don't worry, because right now, I am going to show you how to turn a conversation that is hitting a dead end into something that will keep her tossing and turning in thought for the next 3 days. And do you know what the best part is? You will do it by saying less, not more. By the end of this newsletter, you will master the secret to turning any bland conversation into one filled with chemistry, using just 3 incredibly simple steps. I spent 2 years dissecting hundreds of real-life conversations just to find out why some dialogues create intense excitement, while others kill the mood from the very start. What I found goes completely against everything you have ever been taught. In every conversation, there is always a decisive moment. Either a spark will ignite, or everything will grow cold forever. Most men don't realize that moment is coming, but once you know where it lies, you will never miss it again. I once witnessed a friend named Marcus apply this at a wedding, and the outcome truly amazed me. I'll tell you that story in a moment. So, if you want to stop being the nice guy she forgets after 5 minutes, focus intensely, because this is a complete shift in how you show up and how she perceives you. Once you take this leap, everything changes. Most conversations die within the first 3 minutes. It's not because you are boring or she isn't interested, but because of something you do purely by instinct that unintentionally digs your own grave. You don't even realize you're doing it, and by the time the conversation ends, she has already labeled you in the boring drawer that you can never escape from. Let me paint the picture for you. You're talking to a girl, anywhere. She tells you a bit about herself, maybe where she was born, the work she does, or something she likes. Immediately, your brain jumps into connection mode. You want to create rapport. You want to show her you're listening. You want to make her happy. So, you respond with agreement, support, and praise. Things like, "Oh, that's great. I love that too. That sounds really interesting. It sounds harmless, even like the right move, doesn't it?" But here is the painful truth. You just gave her your approval before she did anything to deserve it. That might sound a bit harsh, but think about it. Why should she exert effort to impress you if you are already impressed from the start? Why should she crave your attention if she already has it firmly in her hand? She won't, and in reality, she stops trying. And this repeats over and over. She says something, you praise her. She says something else, you nod again. You think you are building a connection, but in reality, you are neutralizing all the drama. You're making everything too easy, too predictable, and too safe. There is a reason why you act this way, and it's not your fault. You have been programmed your whole life to be likable, to make others comfortable, and to show interest by validating what they say. In most social situations, that works well. But when you are trying to create attraction with a woman, it is poison. Because attraction does not live in agreement. It lives in tension, in uncertainty, in those moments where she isn't quite sure if you're impressed by her or not. Therefore, the first step to making any conversation captivating is very simple, yet it goes against all your instincts. Stop handing out free approval. Make her work for it, not in a rude or cold way, but by creating just enough doubt so that she actually wants to win you over instead of the other way around. Let's see this in action. She says she's from Dalat. Instead of saying, "Oh, that's great, I love Dalat," you say something like, "Dalat, no wonder you look a bit fragile. But I hope you're not the type who demands to eat chicken and basil leaf hot pot every time the weather gets a little cold." Right. Do you see what just happened? You didn't praise her. You didn't agree immediately. You challenged her playfully. And now she has to defend herself. She has to explain, and she begins to get drawn into your game. Or when she talks about work, instead of complimenting her, you could guess. Let me guess. You're probably the person at the office who specializes in cleaning up the messes that everyone else makes. Right? Now you are teasing. You're making an assumption. She will laugh, or correct you, or play along. Either way, she is truly participating. She is trying to show you who she is instead of just answering questions like a job interview. This is exactly what Marcus did at the wedding I mentioned earlier. He was talking to a beautiful bridesmaid. She said she was a teacher, instead of exclaiming, "Oh, that's a noble profession. I really respect teachers." Marcus looked at her for a moment and asked, "Do you teach kindergarten or high school? Because I see the energy of a kindergarten teacher who's used to soothing naughty little kids." She burst out laughing, said she taught high school, and immediately started explaining why she was nothing like a kindergarten teacher. And just like that, she was the one pursuing his validation. Marcus flipped the script with just one sentence. The conversation shifted from her answering his questions to her trying to prove something to him. This shift is everything because once she is in that mode, she is the one investing in the relationship. She's no longer just being polite, she is genuinely hooked, and that is when flirting begins to happen naturally. However, be careful, because this is where many guys mess up. They think making her work for it means being a jerk. They go too far, they act arrogant or dismissive. That only makes you look insecure and like you're trying too hard to be cool. The key here is playfulness, not malice. You aren't putting her down, you just aren't flattering her unconditionally. You create a bit of friction, a bit of a challenge with a smile on your face, with a vibe that says, "I'm teasing you because I'm confident enough to do so." Think of it this way when you meet someone and they immediately love everything about you. You don't value their opinion because they have no standards. But when someone makes you work a little, when they challenge you or tease you, their approval actually carries value. And that is what you are doing, driving your value high by not giving it away too easily. But even that is not enough, because if you keep teasing and challenging without ever pulling her close, you will become an annoying person or an aggressive guy. You need the second step, and this is where most men miss a wide open goal. You've been talking for 3 or 4 minutes, you've been playful, she's laughing and very excited. Congratulations, but now you're going to hit a wall. You can't tease forever because at some point it will feel superficial. If she starts to feel that this conversation is just surface level jokes without depth, she will lose interest extremely fast. This is when most men panic. They see the energy starting to dip, so they frantically look for ways to maintain it. They ask another question, they tell a long-winded story, they try to impress her with some achievement of their own, and all of those things just pull the conversation back into a boring, predictable orbit. What they are missing isn't more content, but connection. A real connection. Not the "we both like the same movie on Netflix" kind. I'm talking about the kind of connection that makes her feel like you truly see through her, that you are paying attention to something deeper than just surface-level words. And this is where things get thrilling. Most men think connection means asking deep questions like, "What is your passion?" or "What do you expect in life?" Don't do that. That's just another interview, and it makes the conversation heavy and forced. Real connection happens when you notice something about her that she didn't even say, when you catch a vibe, a pattern, an energy, and you name it, not in a weird way, but in a way that makes her pause and think, "Wait, how did he know that?" Let me give you an example. You are talking, she is laughing along with your teasing, but you notice a small detail every time you challenge her. She refuses to back down. She defends her point to the end. So, instead of moving to another topic, stop for a moment and say, "Hey, I noticed something. You have a massive competitive streak. I bet you absolutely hate the feeling of losing at anything. Don't you?" Watch her reaction. She will either agree and tell you a story to prove it, or she will laugh and try to deny it, but accidentally confirm what you said. Either way, she feels seen. That feeling is exactly what creates intense attraction, because you have just proven that you aren't just making small talk, you're actually observing her. This is the difference between flirting and chatting. Chatting is surface level. It is a transaction. You speak. She responds. You change the subject. But flirting is observation. It is catching those small details, how she speaks, how she reacts, how she expresses herself, and then reflecting them back to her subtly and accurately. I learned this from a former colleague named James. He wasn't exceptionally handsome, he wasn't rich, and he wasn't the funniest person. But women were always mesmerized by him, and I didn't understand why until I actually listened to how he conversed. James usually spent the first few minutes being light and fun. Then suddenly, he would drop an incredibly well-timed observation about the person in front of him. Once at a bar, a girl seemed completely uninterested. She only gave short answers and constantly checked her phone. James didn't try to be a comedian, nor did he try to grab more attention. He just observed. After about 2 minutes, he casually said, You're the kind of person who says yes to everything, but then silently regrets it alone, aren't you? She froze, put her phone down, looked straight at James, and laughed a real laugh, not a social one. She asked, "How did you know that?" And just like that, the entire energy of the conversation changed 180 degrees. She leaned toward him, and for the next 20 minutes, she was completely absorbed in the conversation because James made her feel like he truly understood her. He saw something that most people overlooked. That is the power of observation. It pierces through all the external shells and creates a moment of true connection. And the beauty is that you don't need to be 100% right. You just need to be confident enough to make that observation. Because even if you guess wrong, the fact that you dared to say it decisively already makes you interesting. It shows that you aren't afraid of risk. And women respect that much more than you constantly playing safe cards. So, step 2 is make an observation about her character, not just what she says. Pay attention to how she reacts, what she emphasizes, then name it in a way that is playful yet sincere. Phrases like, "You seem like the type who always plans everything out, don't you?" Or, "I bet you're always the friend everyone goes to when they need advice." Or, "You have the energy of someone who's always 3 steps ahead of everyone else." The key is to make it specific enough to be personal, but broad enough so it doesn't sound like generic fortune-telling. When you do it right, the conversation is no longer small talk, it becomes a memory she will remember forever. However, there is still one final piece of the puzzle, the piece that truly creates flirting instead of just an interesting conversation. You can be good at teasing, you can be perceptive in observation, but if you never create tension, if you never make her wonder what you are actually thinking, then the conversation still stops at the friendly buddy level, and friendly leads nowhere. Friendly only gets you a goodbye handshake and the phrase, "You're very nice, but I'm sorry." So what is the difference? Flirtatious conversations always have stakes. There is something hanging in the air, a feeling that something could happen. That this isn't just 2 people killing time, but 2 people challenging each other, testing to see if there is something really there. And that feeling doesn't come from what you say, but from what you do not say. It comes from the pauses, the eye contact, the moments where you let the silence linger a bit longer than the usual comfort level. Most men are terrified of silence. As soon as there is a small gap, they immediately jump in with another question, another joke, or another story. And every time they do that, they unintentionally kill the tension, because tension lives in the gaps, in the moments where she isn't sure what you're thinking, where she has to face uncertainty instead of being rescued by your rambling. Recall the last time you felt real chemistry with someone. I bet there were moments when neither of you said anything, just looked at each other, and the space around you felt compressed, as if a spark was about to explode. That is tension, and you can never create that if you keep filling every second with words. Step 3, which is also the step that separates men who have fun conversations from those who create real attraction. Let the silence breathe. Do not fear the silence. When you have just made an observation or a joke, don't rush to follow it up with another sentence. Let it sink in. Let her feel it. Let that moment linger until it creates a distinct sensation. Imagine this. You're talking. You tease her about something and she laughs. Instead of moving to the next topic immediately, you just look at her, maintain eye contact a bit longer than usual, smile slightly, and then let her be the one to break that silence. 9 times out of 10, she will say something, laugh shyly, or ask you a question back, and when she does, you have flipped the balance of power once again. Now, she is the one working to maintain the conversation. She feels the need to fill that gap. And that is when things become incredibly captivating. I saw this play out perfectly at a party last year. A guy was talking to a girl by the kitchen counter. He said something that made her laugh, and then he stopped abruptly. Without saying another word, he just looked at her with a subtle, knowing smile. You could see she was delightfully flustered. She tucked her hair behind her ear, looked down then back up at him, and asked, "What?" with a radiant smile on her face. The guy just shrugged and said, "Nothing. It's just that you look quite interesting when you're being teased." Those 5 seconds of silence were worth more than any sentence he could have uttered, because they created ambiguity. She didn't know what he was thinking. She didn't know if he actually liked her, or was just playing around. It is that very uncertainty that makes her want to find out, makes her invest more, and makes her start pursuing him. But take note, the mistake guys often make is turning silence into coldness or distance. They stay silent for too long, they break eye contact, and they stare away. That makes things awkward, and she will think you've run out of things to say. A pause only works when you are still present there, when you're still connecting with eye contact or a slight smile, radiating an aura that you're completely comfortable in that silence. Silence is not about ignoring her, it's about allowing the tension to exist instead of immediately dissolving it. Think of a good movie. The most valuable scenes are not when characters talk incessantly, but the moments when no words are spoken, yet everything is felt. The gaze between two characters, the pause before a crucial decision. That is where emotion resides, and that is what you are creating, a moment where the feeling is stronger than the words. You tease her, you make a deep observation, and then you let it breathe. You don't rush to explain, you don't try to cover it up, you just let that moment exist. And it is in that gap that she begins to feel something strange running down her spine. That is when the conversation transcends ordinary friendliness to become something more intense. These 3 steps are not separate techniques to be used one by one. They are 3 parts of a natural flow. You start by not giving her too much approval too soon to create a challenge. Then, you offer an observation about her character to create a connection. Finally, you let the silence speak to create tension. When you cycle through these 3 things naturally, the dialogue becomes captivating without you having to try too hard. It's not about memorizing lines or having perfect timing. It's about understanding the underlying structure of every attractive conversation. Challenge, connection, tension, push, pull, pause. Once you have mastered this structure, you can apply it to anyone, anywhere. I tested this myself for 2 consecutive months. Every time I spoke with a woman, I made sure to execute all 3 steps, not agreeing too quickly, making at least one sharp observation about them, and letting 1 or 2 silences linger longer than normal. And the results were night and day. Conversations that used to wither away after 5 minutes turned into dialogues lasting 20-30 minutes, where she was the one trying to sustain them. The phone numbers I got actually responded. The dates actually led to something further. And do you know what the most magical part is? It didn't feel like work or like acting. It was very natural because I was no longer trying to perform or impress. I was simply creating the space for attraction to sprout instead of unintentionally strangling it as I did before. You don't need to be the funniest person in the room. You don't need to have exotic adventure stories or a flashy life. You just need to understand how attraction is built in a conversation. It doesn't come from blind agreement. It doesn't come from talking non-stop. It comes from challenge, connection, and tension. That's it that is the magic formula. Next time you see a conversation starting to go flat, don't panic. Don't try to fix it by talking more. Take a deep breath and remember these 3 steps. Don't hand out approval too easily. Point out her true character and let the silence speak. Do that, and you will see yourself transforming bland dialogues into mesmerizing moments without having to think too much. Never gain attraction by playing it safe. You only get it when you are willing to create a bit of uncertainty, a bit of friction, a bit of space for her to wonder about you instead of letting her see right through you in the first 5 minutes. I wish you conversations full of excitement and exploding emotions.